everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are taking a really deep dive into an absolutely fascinating concept from the book The Death of Utopia, and we're going to focus specifically on the powerful details packed into Chapter 16. We're exploring a profound, honestly kind of unexpected premise here, how one single philosophical idea, an idea that literally demands we actively crush our own egos, actually built the entire modern digital world we live in today. We are unpacking the biggest takeaways from this chapter, going on a wild journey through philosophy, software bugs, the absolute limits of physics, and ultimately the future of artificial intelligence. So buckle up. Right, let's kick things off with Chapter 16, Two Rooms, Two Futures. Okay, let's dive into this. The author opens this chapter with a visceral, highly cinematic contrast, and it perfectly sets the stage for everything we're about to unpack. Imagine the first room. It's a dingy safe house. The book, Philippine Society and Revolution, is scribbled on the whiteboard. A young activist raises their hand and asks a fairly simple question: is history really on our side? Instantly, the instructor freezes. The sheer terror of doubting in this room is just palpable. The message is crystal clear, right? Do not overthink, just trust the party. Questioning is treated as a weakness, and doubt is strictly punished. Now, I want you to contrast that with the second room. It's 2 a.m. at a tech startup over in Bonifacio Global City. You've got glowing screens everywhere, empty pizza boxes stacked up on the desks, and suddenly a junior programmer yells out, "Oui, mali ang code?" Meaning, hey, the code is wrong. And the room just erupts in cheers. They caught the bug. In this second room, catching an error isn't a crime. It's openly and loudly rewarded. Now, what's really interesting about this slide and this contrast is the core difference in mindsets. The author points out that we are looking at people in the exact same country, the exact same age group, yet they're existing in entirely different universes. In the startup room, doubt is totally normal. Error isn't seen as some massive failure of faith or a breach of loyalty. It's literally the fuel for progress. The source text actually calls this environment the Popperian digital world. Which brings us right into our next section, the power of being wrong. So, what exactly does Popperian mean anyway? And why does this philosophy power that second room we just talked about? Well, it all traces back to Karl Popper. He's a philosopher who introduced a transformative and, frankly, scandalous idea to the world. He argued for a concept called falsification. He stated that a theory is only scientific if it can actually be proven wrong. Think about why this was such a massive shock to the system. For centuries, doing science or building a worldview was mostly about finding evidence to prove yourself right. But Popper, he inverted that completely. True science, unlike rigid dogma, doesn't just sit around patting itself on the back. It actively hunts down its own mistakes. If absolutely nothing can ever possibly prove your theory wrong, well, Popper argued you aren't actually doing science, you're just preaching. And the author distills this whole philosophy down into a simple, incredibly powerful Filipino phrase, mali ako, which translates to I am wrong. Just think for a second about how incredibly hard it is to admit you're wrong in an argument with a friend or coworker. Now imagine building an entire global industry out of that exact admission. This simple phrase is the ultimate dividing line in the book. For a rigid political ideology that claims a total monopoly on historical truth, saying I am wrong is fatal. It completely destroys their illusion of perfection. But for the digital and technological world, mali ako is its very lifeblood. It's the mandatory, non-negotiable starting point for absolutely all improvement. And this brilliantly illustrates our third section, debugging the digital world. Because this concept isn't just about software bugs, it scales all the way up to the very physical foundations of our modern lives. Let's look at how this applies to the global hardware industry. The source material imparts this fascinating argument that Moore's law, the famous observation that computing power roughly doubles every 2 years, survives specifically because the semiconductor industry acted as a giant falsification machine. When engineers hit massive physical walls trying to shrink transistors down to microscopically tiny sizes, dealing with crazy issues like extreme overheating or electrons literally quantum tunneling through physical barriers, they didn't just throw up their hands and give up. They didn't blame reality for not matching their theories, and they certainly didn't double down on legacy designs out of stubbornness. Instead, they relentlessly tested, broke down, and refuted their own assumptions. Popper's philosophy literally became a daily engineering practice. And this exact same cycle scales up to the entire internet, which the author actually calls the biggest falsification arena in human history. The whole system operates on this massive global feedback loop. Step 1, you publish an idea or some code. That's the conjecture. Step 2,
Others review it, test it, and expose its flaws. That's the refutation. And finally, step 3, you patch the bugs and release a better version. That's the revision. It's an endless, churning engine of improvement, driven entirely by the hunt for mistakes.
We see this embedded in the very architecture of the platforms we use every single day. The text highlights Wikipedia, developer forums like Stack Overflow, and open source repositories like GitHub. They are all explicitly built on finding and fixing bugs. As the author notes, this is precisely why a digital encyclopedia like Wikipedia can update and correct itself infinitely faster than a printed one. But let's push that contrast even harder for a second. Wikipedia isn't just faster than print, it is ultimately more accurate precisely because it assumes from day one that it is filled with errors that need finding by the community. The system expects to be wrong, so it's specifically designed to be easily corrected. Moving right along to Section 4, Patch versus Prophecy.
So the crucial point is how this culture of debugging compares to ideological rigidity. The author maps out these two distinct worldviews really clearly. In Popper's world, the tech world, the operating system is, we may be wrong, let's patch it. It's a system fundamentally built to correct errors. In stark contrast, the author outlines the ideological world of Marx, Mao, and Cixin as operating on a very different premise. History guarantees our victory. The text impartially argues that in that closed system, if reality happens to disagree with the theory, well, the theory isn't patched. Instead, criticism is viewed as treason, and the critic is punished for daring to point out the flaw.
The text arrives at a very striking conclusion regarding this divide. Systems that refuse to accept falsification might actually be highly effective at building slogans, generating propaganda, and enforcing absolute conformity. But because they fundamentally cannot tolerate the question, what if we are wrong? They remain technologically and intellectually stuck. As the author so memorably puts it, they can build slogans, but they cannot build search engines. Let's move to our next section, from books to AI, and see how this builds into the future. Because this scales up into the most advanced frontier of technology today, we're moving from simple hardware and websites into the realm of artificial intelligence. The source notes that if artificial general intelligence, or AGI, ever truly arrives, it isn't going to emerge from one perfect, unchangeable formula handed down from above. Instead, machine learning is essentially the Mali-Ako principle placed on autopilot. It's the result of continuous, incredibly rapid self-debugging. Thousands of times a second, a neural network runs a simulation, fails, updates its internal weights to correct the error, and tries again. It's literally an AI constantly asking itself, "San ago Mali, where did I go wrong?" and adjusting its entire architecture based entirely on those failures. The author brilliantly summarizes this as a historical roadmap of human progress. Think about it. In the pre-modern era, knowledge was based on authority. You listened to the king or the ancient text, no questions asked. Then came the scientific revolution, introducing experimentation and real testing. That evolved into the computer age, which was defined by debugging and patching software. And now, we're rapidly entering the AI era, which runs on automated falsification. We've moved from blindly trusting authority all the way to building intelligent systems where exposing errors is automated, continuous, and lightning fast.
And that leads us to the ultimate provocative thought that anchors this entire explainer. What if we are wrong? It's the absolute most terrifying question for any dogmatic movement or closed ideology because it has the power to completely destroy absolute certainty. But as this chapter beautifully illustrates, it is also the fundamental question that builds the future. The willingness to be wrong is exactly what allows us to be better. So what you should take away from all this is the next time you face a complex issue, ask yourself, are you acting like a prophecy that can't be questioned, or are you willing to look for the bugs in your own thinking? Thanks for joining me on The Explainer today. Keep questioning everything, and I'll see you next time.